What is going on, you guys? And welcome back to your channel. Today's video is a little bit different. We actually are going to be breaking down an article that Crone tweeted, basically going team by team, breaking down all of the proposed rosters for the 2022 season. I know I have been breaking them down as I go in the videos and stuff like that. If you guys haven't watched those, I highly suggest going back. I give my opinions on the majority of the leaked rosters so far, but I figured we'd go through this list really quickly, give my thoughts, a more condensed version team by team, and kind of just summarize everything as it currently stands in Roster Mania. So hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Without further ado, let's get started. Alrighty, guys, starting with my team. No changes here. That's, to be expected. We won champs, so nothing too crazy. Optic Texas, as you guys are well aware, they're also not making any changes after doing one of the greatest baits that the Call of Duty scene has ever seen. Granted, it originally started out as not a bait, but they, talked it out, hashed out their issues, and brought the team back. I, for one, like I said, before their initial roster change, was that I was a fan of the team in the first place. I thought that Illy just needed time to reacquaint himself back into the roster without any health issues. They won Major 1 with the team completely healthy. I think that's kind of probably a point that they were harping on when they came together and decided to keep the roster the same. They probably said, we won an event before with this team, we just got to get back to it. Obviously Ender's health is always going to be a question mark at this point. I know it's not the same, but I think something like this forced Tommy to retire. So I don't know if the health issues are going to continue to be a thing. I don't know his situation with that, but I'm happy they're staying together because I think the team's potential is fucking crazy. And I also love playing against them. It's Optic at that point. Crone obviously talks about a couple of things here with just like the Cammy, Dylan, Hydra weird period when Brandon and Ender were dropped. Seattle is another team that's also not making any changes. This kind of surprised me because I think that their core three of Mac, Pred, and Sib is super good. And I thought a lot of people would think that maybe Alec would end up here, but we'll get to where he ended up later down in the article. Well, guys, random side tangent. LAG decided to announce their entire roster before this video went live. So Alec is confirmed on LAG. So everything in this video that I'm saying is essentially confirmed now. So little side tangent there for you. But I think a lot of people saw this as a potential landing spot for Arcitys. Even a couple of other players as well, like Cammy attached. They saw Seattle as a potential landing spot. They're out, not making any changes. Sib was also, I think Sib and Pred were also both potential buyout options for FaZe's fourth, which is yet to be announced at this point. But I think Pred and Sib were maybe trying to get poached by FaZe. I'm not sure on the situation there, but I think it's probably not a shock, but I think a lot of people most likely expected this roster to change in some capacity. A lot of people expected Lamar, but we're saying the same, which I don't have a problem with. I think their core three is fucking crazy good with Max, Sib, and Pred. Two rookie players showing potential like that. Pred had probably a top 3 sub season. So that guy's fucking insane. Lamar's leadership, they did well. So happy to see that. Now getting into potentially my favorite roster of Roster Mania thus far, the Minnesota Rocker with Afro, Attach, Bance, and Cammy. I am a huge fan of this team. I think it's constructed very well. I think they're sub dynamic. I talked about it as well, saying a little side tangent here. If you guys haven't seen the Merc and Maven podcast that the Toronto Ultra puts on, I was a guest on there, and we went in depth with a couple of the rosters. So if you guys want my insight, we kind of deep dive into some of these rosters. So if you want my insight there, go take a look. But at first glance, I really like their sub dynamic, Afro and Ben or Bance. And also, sorry, I know I use a lot of first names and you guys probably get annoyed because I read a couple of comments. It's just how I am. I've always been like a first name kind of person. I never call people by their gamer tags if I know their name. If I call them by their gamer tags, I don't know their name. But I'll try to do better with the gamer tags because I know you guys, obviously it's harder to keep up. So Afro and Bance I think have a really good sub dynamic. Afro is much more head bash, in your face, superstar playmaking, setting pace kind of sub, and Ben is much more ratty, like pick a corner and make a really good play on a hard point rotation kind of player. So he also brings a really good IGL leadership calmness to the comms, which I like a lot. Whenever you hear Toronto Ultras like listen-ins over the last couple of years, you always hear Ben. So I think their sub dynamic is incredible. I think Dylan or Attach on a main AR is something that a lot of fans have wanted for years now. So I'm happy to see him embracing this and transitioning into a main AR. And then Cammy, who I'm a huge Cammy fan. I think he had a down Vanguard season, but the Cold War season, when I really I think when he came into his own as a pro player, the amount of like bailout and superstar potential that I saw from Cammy in the Cold War season just like solidified him as like a top 10 player for me, period. Again, he did have a down Vanguard season, but I think a lot of people did, to be fair. So I'm a big fan of the team. I think the dynamic is incredible. I think the comms should be good. You have Ben and Cam teaming together from Toronto. You have Afro, so like a little European brotherhood going on here. And then I think the roles make perfect sense. So I think this is really good. They even have Fame as a sub right now, and Fame was a really good Challenger sub player. I think he absolutely popped off at every single LAN event that Challengers had last year. And a huge showing at, I think it was like Boston or something. I'm pretty sure it was Boston. That guy's gross. So I think if they have any problems, Fame is there, but I'm a big fan of the team. Hats off to the Minnesota Rocker. Moving on to the Los Angeles Guerrillas, which is where RCDs ended up landing, which I thought RCDs was going to end up on Seattle because it makes sense. He's from Seattle. I think him and Lamar have very good leadership qualities, but I think Alec, in terms of skill, is just like a little bit above Lamar, or accuracy. Sorry, guys. I'm trying my best. So I thought he was going to end up in Seattle. He ends up in Los Angeles, and apparently they're moving here, so we're gonna have double A LA teams. That's gonna be good. I get to play on the LA server. But the team is basically a 1-for-1, and the alleged phase team, as you guys can see, is Slasher. So it's a 1-for-1 trade essentially. Now, at first glance, I'm not sure how to feel about the team. I do want to give Nep the benefit of the doubt because from what I have heard on the flank and just like the inner workings of that New York team, it seemed very poor. It seemed like it wasn't an environment for a player to really flourish. So I don't want to take into consideration Nep's time on New York because I feel like it wasn't really that productive for him as a player. And he also joined the team relatively late into the Vanguard season as well. So I don't want to judge the trio too heavily. I think Kyler is superstar potential. We've known him to be in the past. If you guys remember the Modern Warfare season, he was a MVP caliber player. The guy was insane with Shotzzy next to him. Spart, obviously MVP of Major 2. Granted, it was the Volk, but I think that you don't win MVP strictly because of one gun. So the fact that he has a skill set to do that is very promising. Maybe that was one of the things that brought Alec to LA. I'm not sure. But I think their S&D is going to be really good. I think the S&D on this team is about to be top tier. These guys are always playing Chalice together. They really enjoy playing Call of Duty together, which is always a phenomenal starting point for a roster, believe it or not. So I think the S&D is going to be here. I think Alec brings phenomenal leadership to the team. And I think it really just comes down to Kyler and Nep. I think Spart is going to be a constant. I think he's always going to do what he needs to do with pop-off potential. But I think that their sub-duo with Hook and Nep is going to dictate whether this team succeeds or not. Moving on to the Atlanta phase, which is the move that everyone was really waiting with bated breath to see what they would do. There was, I think, probably 5 or 6 good options here. It was like Cammy, Attach, Pred, Sib. They could bring back Alec. They went with Slasher here, according to Crone. So there was a bunch of different options. They thought about moving like Simp to a flex and trying to get Hydra. So they ended up going with Slasher, which I'm not sure how I feel about. I think MC... I think the thing that's going to dictate the success of this roster is MC's pace. I think that over the Modern Warfare and Cold War seasons, he was a really good flex player. I think he was setting decent pace with a sub, and I thought he was pretty fast. Over the Vanguard season, when he ran main, I feel like this team had their team over Vanguard, had some pretty tough role issues. I think their pacing was pretty poor. I know Alec was very vocal on Twitter about how often he has to change the way he plays. Even in S&D, he said he was running a sub, sniping, carrying bombs. So I'm not sure how bringing in a main AR to switch cell to a flex is going to go. Like I said, he could do it. He did it for 2 years straight. But I'm going solely off of last season because that's the most recent COD. And MC was pretty slow, I'm not going to lie. So I think the leadership is there. Austin is a phenomenal leader. But his leadership style and how he meshes with the other three is going to be extremely important. It's probably more important than MC's pace, even though I said it was important. But I think the way that Austin meshes with these three is going to determine the success of this roster. I'll pivot. I think that he brings a lot more of a different approach to the game than Alec does. He's very skilled. Austin's fucking gross at Call of Duty. So I don't think skill is an issue. I don't think skill was an issue on the last team. I think it was just inner workings of the roster and things like that. So I think the team is obviously fucking could be insane. What do I know? Moving on to Toronto Ultra. They have Kleenex, Insight, Scrappy, and Hixie. This was one that I was actually confused about. I think everyone kind of assumed that Scrappy was coming into the roster. That was like his challenger performance was just too good to neglect to leave in challengers. He was just performing too well. So I'm happy he gets a starting spot. I think him and Zach have a very boisterous personality. I think Scrap is the exact same way Zach is. He always talks shit. He's always that guy. So I'm happy to see more people like that in the league. I think that's something that Call of Duty has always thrived with. So I'm happy to see Scrap in the league. Their fourth was the one thing that I was a little confused about. I know there were rumors about Afro joining this team. I think Afro and Toby could have been like a top 3 sub duo. Granted, they're both kind of the same player, so maybe it would have been a little weird, but I like Hixie here. Hixie was a phenomenal challenger sub. They have 2 challenger players coming in, 2 potential rookie of the year candidates, I might add. So I'm excited to see the future of Toronto. I think they've always done a very good job of talent farming. They've always had a great, not second or B team, but they've always had a really good eye for challenger players. So hats off to Toronto here. They're taking a decent risk. It reminds me of Seattle last year with Sib and Pred. I think it's a very similar situation here. Moving on to the Boston Breach, we have Nero, Vivid, Wake, and Clay or Zinni. I touched on Boston in my last video, and I thought Caesar would be a cool ad here to just have like a Florida Mutineers run back, if you will. But I don't hate the team. Like I said, I gave most of my thoughts on this roster in the last video. I think this roster comes down to Wake. He finally gets to do what he wants to do. When he can do what he wants to do, he is a disgusting talent on an AR. So he's been running a sub. He's been very vocal that he hates running a sub. So he gets to do what he wants to do again, and maybe he can flourish on this team. So I think the success of this roster comes down to him, and if their sub duo can maintain the pace and the speed that they played with towards the end of Vanguard, because I thought those guys were really good. New York Subliners, just seems like a throw it at the wall and see what sticks kind of team. I think Hydra has had a lot of controversy around him over this offseason. I'm not sure what negotiations went on behind the scene. He almost joined Optic. He almost joined FaZe. He ends up staying on the team with Kismet. I do like their dynamic. I think that their sub dynamic is good. I don't know who the leader on this team is going to be, because you're replacing Krim at this point with Caesar and Preston. Again, this is all subject to change. I'm just going based on what Crone had given us. But if we want to meme about it, Caesar and Skies and Hydra seem to be good friends from what Krim was saying on the flank. So it's no surprise to see these guys on the same team at this point. But this team just doesn't really scream, upper echelon at me. I like their sub duo. Like I said, I think that's a really good starting point with Kismet and Hydra. But I think Preston has been a little under the radar over the last couple of seasons. I think people were expecting a little bit more out of him over the Vanguard year as well. I think he's just been playing down to his typical standards. So I think if he turns it around, then the superstar potential here is crazy. Obviously, Paco is apparently worth $500,000, and they got second. So we'll see what can happen. Alrighty, guys, we're going to talk about the Florida Mutineers and the Ravens in the same light because they share 2 players, which is a little strange. I'm not sure how this dynamic is going to shake out. But there's a couple of players, as you guys can see here, that are up in the air for both of these teams. I think Beans and Vic are 2 top-tier challenger players that are trying to get into the league right now. So I think they'll eventually find landing spots. But number one thing when you look at this Ravens team, it's super AR heavy. You have Paul, Trey, and Gizmo, so you have 2 flexes. Nasty's kind of the only sub, and he's a slower pace sub at that because Afro was their, obviously, their pace setter last year, if you will. So this is a Florida team. This team belongs on the Florida Mutineers for all the ARs. And if you look at the Mutineers projected team, you have Vic Nasty. Vic is a super good challenger player. He played on Toronto Academy, and I think that he's one of the best sub talents that is not in the league at this point. Again, he's going to be super highly contested when I mentioned down here with him and Beans. So I'm happy to see him potentially getting a spot, but these 2 teams don't jump out at me. It's very similar to the New York team. I think these 3, in terms of just star power, when you look at the rest of these rosters as we go up, I just don't think that, again, I could be wrong. Maybe I'm speaking out of my ass here, but this just doesn't jump out at me, if that makes sense. And I'm sure you guys probably share the same sentiment as me. And then just for memes, we get down here and we just have Donnie on the Legion. So I don't know what Don is going to do. I know Chrome was talking about Clay, TJ, and Venom. That is what I heard was Clay, TJ, and Venom, but that was... Excuse you. Blake, I am recording a video. I heard the same thing. This was weeks and weeks ago, though, so I'm not sure on the... how far along that is, but yeah, I don't know what Don's doing. Well, guys, that is going to wrap up today's video. I just wanted to go over all the projected teams. Obviously, a lot of these are still up in the air. I think in terms of things that could still move, I think all of these are probably done. If I had to guess, I think from here down is where things could get a little interesting. I think these 3 are cemented, but I think literally from Hixie down is where things get a little weird. So obviously this good stuff could still change. If it does, I'll make some more videos on it, but I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know on your thoughts on the teams. I'm a little surprised with some of the moves, I'm not going to lie, but overall, it seems like some storylines are starting to line up for the Modern Warfare 2 season, and I'm excited for it. So appreciate you guys for watching. And as always, have a fantastic rest of your day.